for all the practicing infertility specialists, for people who come with recurrent pregnancy loss. And I take the privilege to introduce Dr. Kritika Sivaraj. She is fellowship in pediatric genetics, completed her MBBS at Kilpauk Medical College, and did her PG at SRMC Chennai, fellowship in pediatric genetics at IGI ICH Bangalore under the guidance of renowned professor Dr. Meenakshi Bhatt. Interested in dysmorphology, prenatal counseling. We welcome Dr. Kritika, and the stage is yours. And
Thank you,
any
sir.
people, any doubt, you can raise your hands in the chat box, or you can even type in the chat box. And once again, it's a great pleasure to welcome all the doctors who are participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the warm welcome. So I'll just start screening my presentation. And good afternoon, one and all who have joined today for this presentation. I thank each and everyone for joining.
Mama.
So today's topic is recurrent pregnancy loss. As introduction given by sir, this is one of the toughest topic, but as a geneticist, I didn't knew initially when I was preparing. I thought it's going to be easy for me to put slides and to gather information related to recurrent pregnancy loss. But to be frank, it was really difficult because it was like tangled and so many questions, unsolved questions were there, and there were no answers to be found from recent consensus. So I've tried my best level to give a greater information so far I have gathered, so that it's useful for everyone who have joined today. And I request everyone to share their views at the end of the session, and you can ask me your queries as well as questions, so that I can spend more time with you all, and we can answer your queries at the later end. And coming to the topic, you all know that the definition of recurrent pregnancy loss has been stated by many guidelines, and being a pediatrician who is practicing genetics, and it's like I'm as if I'm a lamb entering a lion's den, because it is more of physicians who is going to enter this session, but I have gathered my courage to enter today into your den. So this is my definition which I've gathered, and I'm using all the guidelines as per the guidelines. It is from Royal College of Pediatrics Obstetricians and Gynecologists. It is referred to as the recurrent miscarriage losses, which consists of occurring in 3 or more successive pregnancies up to 24 weeks. And as per the European Society for Human Reproduction and Embryology guideline, it states that recurrent pregnancy loss has 2 or more spontaneous miscarriages before the fetus reaches viability. In the sense, it is from the time of conception up to 24 weeks of gestation. And as per the American Society of Reproduction and Reproductive Medicine, it is 2 or more consecutive miscarriages, but they don't take into account the gestation age. So, and lastly, the WHO, which defines as 3 or more consecutive pregnancies before 20th week of gestation. And this was the old definition, which was initially initially defining RPL. But now the above 3 were the latest definitions from the standard guidelines. So you might ask me, like, why I'm quoting all the 3 and having so many differences between each guidelines, because each guideline says either 2 consecutive miscarriages or 3 consecutive miscarriages, and some says 20 weeks, some says 24 weeks, and it was really confusing actually to follow which guidelines. But does this make really an impact? Yes, it makes impact, because when you say 2 or more successive miscarriages, the percentage of people who are affected is actually 5 to 10% in the general population. And when you go for 3 or more, it is actually 1 to 2% of couples among the general population. So there is a vast difference when we say the definition. But since we have so many guidelines, it is being followed according to the area, geographical area. Coming to the next slide. So the etiology and risk factors, as everyone know, the most common being the uterine factors, genetic, immunological factors, hormonal, the inherited thrombophilias, the male factors, and also the risk factors, which are the obesity, poorly controlled diabetes mellitus, advanced maternal age and paternal age. And I would be concentrating more on the genetic causes because it is more easier for me to say more about genetics than saying more about OG. But anyway, I'm covering the OG topics at the end as well. So coming to the genetics part, I've made as case scenarios so that it is more interesting and not boring. So coming to the genetic causes, we all know it is a chromosomal aberrations, that is nothing but there is any problem in the karyotype of the couple. It can be either a translocations, which is reciprocal, or a Robertsonian translocations. And single gene polymorphisms are nothing but the spelling mistakes, which we see, which we name it as mutations. Copy number variants are the sequence of genes which is missing or which is more. So that means a copy number variant. Or cryptic chromosomal anomalies are nothing but which cannot be detected easily, which are very minute. And single gene defect is... Hello? Can you kindly mute? So single gene defect is nothing but the Mendelian disorders. So what is the need for a genetic evaluation? You might ask. We do a complete genetic analysis only to know the prognosis of the disease. Like if we know the prognosis only, we can tell them the recurrence risk, as well as we can counsel them, offer a prenatal diagnostic testing to the couple. It's a complete workup. And what tissues we generally take for genetic testing? Ideally, if the fetal tissues is available, it's well and good. But most probably we don't get the fetal tissue always. So we start up with the parents, because a fetal tissue will be the proband. But when we don't have a proband, it's always preferable to start with the parents. And coming to, this is just a flow chart which I have been saying the same thing. So I don't want to go through this again. So I'm directly going to the case. This is case 1. This is a couple who is the age of the couple were less than 30 years of age, and they were non-consanguineous couple, married for nearly 4 years, and they presented to us in the genetic clinic with a history of 4 consecutive miscarriages, and each time it was an early pregnancy loss around 6 to 8 weeks of gestation. So you might ask me whether any early scans were taken. Yes, there were some early scans taken in the last 2 miscarriages. I mean, the last 2 pregnancies, they have done 2 early scans. And in each scan, there were documentation of fetal heart rate. But I don't know about the first 2 cases. And as a geneticist, we always start with a 3-generation pedigree. And you can see that this is the first generation, this is the second generation, and this is the third generation. So when we were asking the father, he gave a vague history that his mother had 2 miscarriages, but he was not very sure about which month it was happened, and other things he didn't say. And this information was actually given by the wife. And when we were going through this, it was obvious, like there are some history here, but we don't know what is the reason. So the complete workup of the couple was done. Like it is related to uterine factors, as we have discussed earlier. All those things were done, A+ screening, everything was done, and then they came to the genetic clinic. So we proceeded initially thinking that there should be something in the karyotype, and this was the thing we came up with. So this is the karyotype of the husband, and you can see that there is something here, markings, this one, this. I know it is not pretty understandable, but these are the markings of the chromosomal regions actually. So this is the banding region which we see. And you can see that there are 2 arrows pointing. This is actually a bit of 4 is sitting on 5. That is nothing but it's called reciprocal translocation. So reciprocal means this element is translocated to this element. So a better figure here to show about that. So consider this as 4 and this as 5, and you can see there is a switch of the elements between these two here. So this is nothing but reciprocal translocation, and this husband was a carrier of, he's a balanced reciprocal carrier translocation involving chromosome 4 and 5. So this was the result. So I know this is to be frank, he was not clinically, he didn't have any symptoms. He is a normal male with well and fit. He's not having any disorders. So far, no systemic disorders in him. His intelligence was normal. So we tell it as a balanced reciprocal translocation when there is no issues. And so what is the options? Like, so when this couple had a pregnancy, recurrent pregnancy losses because of the balanced reciprocal translocation, the husband being a carrier. So what are the pregnancy outcomes? When we look into the pregnancy outcomes, there are actually 4 pregnancy outcomes. And if you subdivide, it is actually 6 pregnancy outcomes together. So I've just given a small, simple diagram here to understand. So if the male is, these are the gametes of the male, and this is the gametes of the female, the wife. So when he is producing gametes, you can see it will be either a normal 4 and 5, 4 with a 5 translocated, 4 translocated with 5 and 5, or the combination 4, 5 and 5, 4. This is nothing but to indicate the translocations which are in the chromosome. And you can see below, it is all normal. This is the female, the wife. So when they mate together, when these gametes fuse together and form a zygote, and it results in a normal pregnancy. It is in a normal fetus, to be frank. And when this happens, you can see more of 4s here. So it is partial trisomy 4 and less of 5, because half of 5 is occupied by 4. So it is monosomy 5. And here you can see that more of 5, so it is actually trisomy 5 partial and monosomy 4. And if in this case, if it is like this, then it is a balanced translocation carrier as that of the father. So you can come to a conclusion that 50% there is a recurrence, they can have a pregnancy loss consecutively. But 50% it can result in a normal pregnancy or a balanced translocation carrier. So at this stage, what is the next plan of treatment, plan of management, to be frank? So we tell the people about the couple being counseled about the recurrence risk and give the options to them. So the option can be either they can go for spontaneous pregnancy because their age, they don't have any age factor risk. They are young couple, and the maternal age, paternal age, everything is under control. They don't have any comorbidities. So, and each pregnancy was a spontaneous conception. So they can conceive easily. So they can try more if possible. But I know we can say this easily, but as a patient, when they come to us, they have so much of agony, they can't undergo more pregnancy losses. If you counsel them, it is really difficult. A counseling session takes nearly 2 hours for them to counsel them, actually speaking. So the next treatment option will be an IVF with a PGT, actually speaking. So I will tell briefly about PGT, and I know most of them might be knowing about pre-implantation genetic testing, which is being carried now in all infertility specialty hospitals. And PGT is nothing but taking one cell from the embryo at 8-cell stage and checking for the genetic related disorders. So previously it was referred to as PGS and PGD. These were the old terms, actually speaking. So PGS is mainly for aneuploidy screening. Aneuploidy is nothing but the chromosomal disorders, and PGD was mainly for the known genetic disorders like sickle cell, thalassemia, cystic fibrosis, so and so, SMAs, anything, when the parents are carriers for a known genetic disorder. But now we name it as the PGS, the screening part, as PGTA. This pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidies. And PGD is having subdivisions as PGTM, SR, and HLA. Nothing but M is for monogenetic disorders, SR is for structural, and HLA is mainly for transplant. So this is a a small info related to pre-implantation genetic testing. But there are some cost factors associated with it. Actually, you know that the cost for a PGT is starting from 20,000 to even up to 1.5 lakhs. We have this PGT testing kits. So it depends upon the social as well as the financial background of the couple. So we give the options to them. We don't give a suggestion. We just give the options openly. We give the options to them. So coming to the next case. So this is this couple. I've seen them some 3-4 months back in a hospital. They came to me after 3 recurrent miscarriages, and each one were early pregnancy losses. In the sense, it was around 6 to 8 weeks. So all the workup complete related to OG workups and immunology workups, everything was done. And so they came for the genetic workup also to us. So genetic workup, we proceeded with the couple karyotype, and you can see this is the karyotype of the wife. So she was having inversion in chromosome 9. Inversion is, it was actually pericentric inversion. What is pericentric inversion is nothing but, you can see this is a chromosome with the P and a Q region, and this is the centromere, that is the connecting part, and which breaks and just rotates 180 degree, and you can see it is rejoined here. Just a figure to show more in detail actually. So, and this report was reported as normal by the cytogenetic lab, because pericentric inversion 9 is commonly seen among population, and we don't know whether this was a cause for the recurrent pregnancy loss. So we reported to the patient that this is a normal thing, and we have seen couples who carry this inversion 9 and have given birth also. So we counsel that way. But at the back of my mind, I was not that much convinced, because in the upcoming slides I will show why I was not convinced. So this is another couple, the same scenario as a previous case, just showing that this husband had one more marker, one more karyotype change, which was called as PS talk, PS plus. PS plus is nothing but the satellite region is increased. That is called PS talk. Nothing complicated, actually speaking. So this one had an increase in its satellite region. Hello. This one had an increase in his satellite region. But this couple had 2 recurrent losses and they came to me. So I don't know whether there is a consensus followed in India saying the definition which we have stated, like the guidelines which we have stated, whether 2 pregnancy losses, after 2 pregnancy losses, should they be referred, or after 3 pregnancy losses, should they be referred to a geneticist? I'm just puzzled, actually speaking. I don't know. So anyway, it also involves the anxiety part of the couple. I was working on it when I learned that it was the anxiety part which was more working on this. So this couple, now as I said, in this case, after 2 consecutive pregnancy losses, this one also early pregnancy losses, and we worked on it and we found a normal variant in the husband. At present, this mother is pregnant and she had caused 13 weeks of gestation, and her NT has been normal. So we think that since this couple had crossed the 13 weeks, we think hopefully that this pregnancy will be continuing, and I will keep updating you related to this. So going to the next slide, I was saying I was not convinced with the previous result, actually, right? So this is the polymorphic variations, the polymorphic chromosomal variations which we come across in our daily practice. And I am sure many of them would have got these chromosome results when you are evaluating your RPL patients. I think, am I right? So polymorphic variations, what are these? As a genetics person, we also have so many lack of knowledge related to this polymorphic variations. We every time when we get a polymorphic variation, we call our cyto team head and we ask them, what is it? Can we give? Can we take it as normal? Can we believe in this test and tell the parents, the couple, that this is a normal test result? They say yes, because they are also in a confused state. But then they say yes because they before giving this presentation, I have spoken to head cytogenetic head, and as per that ma'am's words, it is like more of the prenatal samples when they receive. It is more of polymorphic variations in the fetuses. So they say we see more of fetuses also having polymorphic variations, and they don't have any structural abnormality. those samples were sent as a part of advanced maternal age. So she was saying that this can be considered as normal, but I will say more related to this now. So these are the polymorphic variations which we come across. This is H plus in the sense the length of the heterochromatin. Heterochromatin is nothing but a region in the chromosome which has no genetic material. The heterochromatins and the satellites, these acrochromosomes actually have satellites. Acrochromosomes are nothing but 13, 14, 15, 21, 22. They have just a satellite on their head like a kudumi. So when there is increase in the satellite regions or in the heterochromatic regions, they are considering it as normal actually. So more frequently, these heterochromatin increase are seen in chromosome 1, 9, and 16. And you can have the inversions. Inversion is more common in chromosome 9 and as well as the sex chromosome. The Y chromosome has more of inversions and increase in its heterochromatins as well. So coming to the importance, does this polymorphic variation has any impact on recurrent pregnancy losses? Yes, there are papers to support this. This is some of the papers, 2017 update, and this one is also a 2017 paper, which was saying chromosomal polymorphisms are associated with female infertility. And this one says Y chromosome polymorphism may contribute to increased risk of male-induced, the male factor-induced unexplained recurrent miscarriages. But this is all in a debate mode, actually speaking. We don't know because there is no definitive consensus, definitive studies, meta-analysis on this to say that this polymorphic variations are related to RPL. As well as polymorphic variations can cause implantation failure and it's a main cause which is also seen in infertility. So we need more light into this situation. Let's see. So coming to the next, so when we get a polymorphic variation in the report, we get all these additional points mentioned in those reports actually. They say this is the limitation because the banding resolution is 400 to 450. So they say we don't rule out all these subtle chromosomal rearrangements, deletions, micro deletions. So in this state, we are stuck in between whether to proceed more or to believe them. It's actually, we don't know what to do, to be frank. So we also asked them whether shall we do with the microarray in this situation because they have seen that micro deletions cannot be picked, subtle chromosomal rearrangements not picked, then what to do? Actually, we scratch our head, to be frank. So we don't know what is happening, but anyway, hopefully we'll get a solution later. And coming to the next slide. So this slide, I just want to show the importance of a microarray, how microarray is helping in a product of conception. So in this case, this was actually a couple who had 3 pregnancy losses. In the last pregnancy, they have sent for a microarray 750K. I'm stressing on 750K now. I'll tell later what is the stressing point behind that. Okay, so this one had a gain in the chromosome 22 actually. So it was considered as complete duplication of chromosome 22. So it is nothing but a trisomy 22, extra copy of 22 in the fetus. So what we thought was, as I said in the case 1, we don't know whether it could be a balance, any of the couple, the parent, either anyone is a reciprocal translocation carrier, we don't know. So what we did was, we did the karyotype for the couple. We did a karyotype for both and they were both normal. So we think this to be an spontaneous sporadic event which happened that time. And yet we don't know what is the reason for their recurrent pregnancy loss. They are under workup now. The next one, this is a similar case, but you can see that we didn't find any results here in the microarray. So when we discussed with the lab, there were many points which they were saying us related to this. So the reason, what is the reason for any failure? Is there any reason? Yes, there is some reason, because when we collect fetal tissue, it will be more fully, when there is an abortus, it will be more, what to say, we don't get a good tissue from the abortus when we are sending for a sample like this. But it is advisable if we take more of a villus sample or a fetal tissue so that we can get a good result. And it also says when the POC sample is going for a microarray, we have to send the mother's blood, because we don't know from the fetal tissue whether we are sending the mother tissue along with it, we don't know. So we have to do a test called maternal cell contamination along with this microarray. And coming to the next, does this microarray help in any way for this product of conception? Yes, it helps in few ways. One way is we can't apply a karyotype to a abortus. We can't do a karyotype testing here. And you all know most common cause for a spontaneous pregnancy loss is chromosomal aberration. That is a chromosomal disorder. So we suspect more than 50% spontaneous losses in early pregnancies are due to chromosomes. So can we do a karyotype in a abortus? No, actually speaking, we can't, because the karyotype needs a live tissue for the culture to grow. Or if you are staying in a good lab nearby, you can take the tissue immediately to the lab, you can do that. But since we are staying in Salem and our samples go to Chennai or Bangalore, we can't send this in a POC. And so the next, what is the next option? There are so many companies who are offering a few testers which are called as Carolite Bobs or other things are there, but it depends upon the cost factor also. So most of the physicians and most of the clinicians are offering now microarray for POC, and we see that in the microarray you can also store the DNA part also. DNA can be stored for later use even if you don't get any answer in the first level of investigation. So microarray gives a clear picture. And as I stressed earlier, I was stressing 750K. I said I will tell the importance later. So there are two things, 315K and 750K. So what is it? Generally 315K is for the prenatal sampling, and 750K is for postnatal, mainly for neurological disorders, any autism workups, we do a 750K. Or even extremely dysmorphism, we can do a 750K. What is it? What are the numbers? 315 and 750 is nothing but the probes. 3,15,000 probes are used, and 7,50,000 probes are used in this microarray. That's it. So is there any other higher end investigations? Yes, there are so many higher end microarray investigations are there, but I don't want to confuse you all. Okay, so you are saying that it is 315 is for preconception. Then why did you do a 750K? Because I thought I'll get more information in 750K, and as well as the parents were more affordable. So there was much difference between 317 and 750K cost. So I proceeded with this. But it's up to the clinician who can decide 315 is also okay, 750 is also okay for a POC. That's it. And one more important thing which we can make up from the micro array is a loss of heterogeneity, which we say LOH related to genetics. LOH is nothing but, if we find LOH, means we all have one representative from our parent, and each representative will be different for in each gene. When both the genes look alike, we say there is that heterogeneity is lost. It means that there is some autosomal recessive disorder running, so it gives a clue there. So that's the only importance here. So coming to the case 4, this is actually an interesting case whom I have seen 6 months back. So this is a non-consanguineous couple. I didn't draw the pedigree completely because it was an extensive pedigree, but this couple had first 2 early pregnancy losses, which was in 6 to 8 weeks. And the third one, it was every time it was a spontaneous conception. The third one, they had increased NT of 3 mm with a cystic hygroma, which got aborted by around 13 weeks. And in the 16th week gestation, I was called in for an opinion. And I have taken this case here because as per the guidelines, this can be considered here because it was all spontaneous abortions. So I'm taking this case here. So in the 4th conception, it was increased NT of 6 mm with the hydrops fetalis. So what we decided here, so we have taken a pedigree, and what we decided was the parents were not affordable. So anyway, we did a karyotype for this fetus, and we stored the DNA of the fetus. The karyotype was normal. So the interesting point here is, I want to emphasize this. It's always better we see the parents. I just want to emphasize this here because we just see the deceased person or the deceased fetus always. But it is important you see the parents also, because you get lot of clues from your parents, because they are the 50% contributors for the fetus, actually the baby. So this is the mother, and she was short. She is short as well as short stature. And when I was seeing her, you can see her hair. She's having a very curly and brittle hair. It was, and she had a downward palpable fissure. This is nothing but the palpable fissure. We say it should be generally in a horizontal line if you draw it. But here you can see she is having a mild down slanting, and there is a mild degree of hypertelorism. Hypertelorism is nothing but the distance between the two eyes. She is having a prominent mouth, and you can see that she is having some webbing here actually. And she was short stature, and her intellectual how was her intelligence? No, she was having a mild intellectual deficit. Her language was not very clear, actually speaking. And her hands and feet, she had more of blood circulation. uh, those were the features. Other than that, I couldn't make whether she had a shield chest and other things. But this is her side profile. You can see that there is a low set here, but it's not, it is okay. It is normally placed. Actually, it is not dysmorphic. So these were her features. And I have put two reference pictures here because this is a Noonan syndrome girl. You can see the curly hair, all those facial features here. She's having a web neck. And this syndrome, it's actually Costello syndrome. It's called Costello. These are a group of disorders which comes together, like Noonan, Costello are like a family because they come in a general common genetic pathway. It's called RAS MAP kinase pathway. So some of her features were fitting in, and so we had a clue like whether she could be having something like a Noonan or a Costello, I don't know. But then I had a clue there, and we thought it could be an autosomal dominant disorder which is running, which is causing all this. It's all it's all a guess only. It's all like we suspected all these things, but it's not completely worked. And coming to the father, the husband, you can see that he's having a deep set eyes. It is all internally placed eyes. And you can see he's also having down slanting with a very big nose, actually speaking, and a small mouth. There is a condition in genetics called 22q deletion syndrome. All the logicians will be knowing that. So in this condition, they have a cardiac issue. They will be having absent-timers. It is nothing but the Dye-George syndrome. So I don't know, but then he was having, otherwise he was normal, nothing else. Only those soft markers, which was which I got it. Okay. So I explained all these things to them, and the screening for echo was done to the mother. The mother was normal, and we told them they need a further complete evaluation before they are proceeding to the next pregnancy. And so far I have not got any call related to them, to be frank. So what we did was a DNA storage. So as a geneticist, I have to emphasize this more important, more clearly here, because 2 ml of fetal blood, the cardiac blood, or some fetal tissue can help a family. Yes, it can do a greater change in their life, actually speaking. You might be surprised I'm saying so much exaggeration to this test. Actually speaking, yes, this helps a lot of people. And the thing is, this 2 ml of blood can help them for the next pregnancy. Before that pregnancy, we can help them with the genetic testing, and prenatal diagnosis can be offered to them. This will be of great help, to be frank. And you can ask me how to store this, like when there is a critical situation, we don't know how to transport this and other things. Only simple thing is we can take a 2 ml of blood from the fetal cardiac. If the fetus is a very big one, like 18 weeks, 19 weeks, you can easily take an intracardiac blood and take the blood, store it in your hospital fridge, the lab fridge. There is a fridge door. You can store it in the fridge door for even 1 week, and you can send the sample for a storage. And or if you don't get a cardiac blood from the fetus, you can take small tissues from the thigh, and you can store in a saline, not in formalin. It should be stored in a saline, and this can help the family. Like it can be even like a ray of hope for them, actually, for the future things. So so how much cost is this? Actually, the cost, if you ask me, it is just 2,000 for a DNA storage, and they store it for nearly 2 years. So even they can, in those critical situation, not everyone can afford for so many things, but this is one of the thing which is most affordable to the couple, and it will be more helpful for them for the future. Coming to the next slide, this is yet another case. So this, we are working on it at present, actually speaking. So this is the pedigree. This is my pedigree actually. So I don't want to, I didn't have much time to draw complete pedigree. So I thought I'll take a screenshot and share it here. So you can see that this is a non-consanguineous couple, and I've written the mother as 144 centimeter because she was short stature. And she also had some dysmorphic features, in the sense she was having increased hair growth over our face, at the back, everywhere she was having so much of hair growth actually. And then otherwise she was short, that's it. And she had some giant melanotic nevi. So many nevis were there over her chest and back. So this was the only finding from the mother. And you can see that in this first generation, there was nothing prominent. And in this generation, the mother had a sister who had a heart disease. Other than that, no significant things were there. So coming to this couple, they had totally, now including the pregnancy, totally 6 spontaneous conceptions over a span of 2013 to 2020 now. So the first conception, every time the conception was only a male fetus. Actually, you can say they all were male fetuses. And every time the pregnancy was continued up to 5 months. So according to the guideline, I'm using it because they have said up to 24 weeks we can take it for RPL. So we thought we'll discuss this case here. So every time at 5 months, the mother had a IUD. So the previous scan, so far before that, the scans showed no abnormalities. Everything was normal. So it was reported every time, it was reported normal. Only positive findings were like LICA was reduced. There were a history of PROM in some. So these were the only clenching points there. And but she told me like she can feel the fetal movements well. Though in the first time, I don't know how she felt, but consecutively she was saying her fetal movements were well. So we took up this case 3 months back, and we started to proceed with further testing. So initially, and now she's around 15 weeks pregnant actually. This is the lockdown effect actually speaking. So coming to the clinical points. So 5 male IUDs, non-consanguineous couple, fetal losses almost happening around 5 to 6 months, and mother with a mild dysmorphism, as I said. But every time there is no DNA stored. So these were the probands every time missed. So what we have now is only the parents, the mother and the father. No one else actually speaking. So we thought initially we'll proceed with a couple karyotype because chromosomal aberrations are the general thing to be ruled out, but the karyotype was normal. So we thought it could be something X-linked disorder or an inborn error of metabolism. Something is happening. So we proceeded with a test called clinical exome sequencing. I will tell in a easy language, like a normal layman language. Clinical exome sequencing means we are doing a spell check. So we are doing a spell check of our genetic material. That is called exome sequencing. Sequencing is nothing but reading frame by frame of the gene and looking for this. So we are going to see whether there is any spelling mistake is there. That is called exome. So clinical exome is related to this disorder. We have screened the genes. So what came next? So this was the result. It came just yesterday. So suda vada kurtamari. So this one came yesterday evening, and we all were so collapsed because only the mother is having a carrier. She is a carrier for a pathogenic variant. Pathogenic variant in the sense, there was a gene they found, and they found a change in that, and they say this could be the reason. This gene actually causes fetal akinesia and it results in IUD. So there are literature saying this gene can be associated, but it's not X-linked. It is actually autosomal recessive. But we don't know what is the thing, because we have one copy which is defective and the other copy from the father, we didn't detect anything. And she is 15 weeks pregnant. So we don't know what to do. So now the father is not having any gene in this gene, he's not having any spelling mistake, actually speaking. So what now we have decided is, we decided to proceed with the microarray. So microarray is nothing but finding a fill in the blanks. It is like fill in the blanks. You are finding the deleted segments or a duplicated segment. You are going to see whether it is doubled or whether it is reduced. That is the layman language for a microarray. So we are going to do that. So let's hope we'll update you in the next what is happening. So coming to the next thing. So all my 5 cases were more related into genetic part. I just wanted to cover what we do in our clinic. So I've discussed all those cases above were my clinical cases over the past 1.5 years here. So so far, if you ask me whether I have come across with interesting things, yes. So though I've portrayed only those interesting cases here, but we are also in the midline. We don't know. We have not crossed beyond few cases. So sometimes the couple have a spontaneous pregnancy, and sometimes they don't. So there is a lot of psychological issues also happening in between. So I'm just covering the other features, the causes of RPL, so that it makes complete presentation. So these are the anatomic causes for the RPL. As everyone knows, it can be a congenital uterine anomaly, and the anatomic causes, this what we discuss now, is the most common treatable causes for the RPL. So it's always better they do screening before sending to the other specialties, the OG complete workup being done before they send someone to us. So the congenital uterine anomaly, as you see, there is a septum here, and this is the external picture of the uterus. Outside there's no abnormality. There can be fibroid or polyps which can cause. And also, there was a paper saying that chronic endometritis can be associated with the RPL. And in endometritis, what happens is the endometrium is covered mostly with the plasma cells. So we don't know whether endometrial biopsy, the role of endometrial biopsy, there was so many controversials there also. So if endometrial biopsy is done, it confirms the diagnosis and it helps with the treatment actually. And coming to the next cause, the endocrine causes. As you all know, endocrine causes are more common next to uterine causes. This is the hypothyroidism. I've written a query subclinical hypothyroidism because from in the latest papers, latest consensus, they have said subclinical hypothyroidism is not the reason for RPL, but previously they have said it could be a reason for RPL. So there is a dilemma there. And autoimmune thyroiditis, hyperprolactinemia, PCOS, and diabetes, as well as obesity. So these are the treatable conditions which can be treated, and a more emphasis on this paper because there are papers saying that luteal phase defect can have RPLs, and one paper, this is from November 2019 from Cochrane review, they've said that progesterone given for women with the recurrent pregnancy losses are helpful, having a positive review. But one thing which I want to say here is progesterone when given in the early trimester, like early pregnancies, 5 to 10 weeks, there are been some effect on the private part. I mean, if it is a male genitalia, it can result in some features of local DST. And we have seen cases like presenting with the penoscrotal hypospadiasis or a bifid scrotum. There were cases reported that. So I don't know whether it is being reported beneficial in the paper, but there are some side effects also with this. So we have to be precautious while using them. So some more immune mediated, as I said, this is one of the causes for RPL. And when you compare the uterus of a woman with RPL to that of a normal woman, the uterine NK cells are actually increased. So this NK cells actually, what to say, they affect the destabilization of the placenta. So there is some implantation failure happening. So there is more limelight needed in this, actually, in this field. And there are many papers saying, these are latest papers from 2019 and 2018, saying that there are immunotherapies for recurrent pregnancy losses, and there are some improvements shown because in this, and there is some improvement in fertility as well following the immunotherapies. But we need more meta-analysis and clinical data, clinical trials in this field, because it's always in the research area now, but we need more insight into this. And there are over few centers in North which are giving immunotherapies actually, which I gathered from one of my senior. So coming to the next, which we all know antiphospholipid antibody syndrome. So the definition, when you diagnose it, is nothing but 2 times APL positive in 2 measurements 2 weeks apart. And also there should be any thromboembolic event or pregnancy complications. Pregnancy complications in the sense it should be an IUGR or a preterm, or it can be an RPL. So I was not clear when I was reading whether a positive APL antibody patient without any other complications, can we start them on aspirin or heparin? I don't know actually, because it was a debatable. But this Cochrane review published the latest 2020 May, they say they were discussing about this aspirin heparin and or both combo for people with the APLA and recurrent pregnancy loss. They have given that if when aspirin and heparin both given in a pregnancy, they have had more survival of the fetus. So we have to, this is also, we have to read about more in detail and we have to decide. The male factor, which I have covered earlier, I have said Y chromosome polymorphisms are generally reported with infertility and RPL. But all these topics I know from past few slides, I have been saying we need proofs to, more proofs in this, more meta-analysis and either RCT trials in this actually. So hopefully in our near future, we'll have more insight into these topics, I think. And the DNA fragmentation, actually it is higher in this RPL couples. So lifestyle modifications and others can help out in this. And I have written Y chromosome microdeletion. Y chromosome microdeletion is generally seen in infertility couple, but sometimes it can be associated with RPL. So this is a complete tabular column of all those things, but I'm not going into in detail. But this is the latest one, and you can see that unexplained RPL, there are trials of progesterone, immunomodulating drugs, aspirin, and heparin, but it's all individual practice. There is no consensus saying you should do this, you should do that. So it depends upon the practice of the individual practitioner. They can do whatever they wish to and whatever protocol has helped them. And at the end of my session, I had so many unanswered questions when I was preparing this topic. So what to do when no cause is found? I was also embarrassed. I don't know how to deal a couple who have no cause, and how to counsel and reassure the couple. That was the next question. So it is more of a psychological breakdown, and I know you also, most of them would have faced this situation, and it is one of the toughest counseling sessions, to be frank. And is women with RPL are hyperfertile? This is actually a new term which was actually on the I was just reading, so I thought it was more catchy, so I thought I will share here. So they say hyperfertile because when the woman, when you compare a RPL woman uterus with the other woman, the RPL woman endometrium is receptive. Receptive in the sense it is not acting to any implantation, like any zygote. Even if it is abnormal embryo also, it can come and implant. Normal embryo also can implant. So it is not reacting, it is very receptive. But in a normal person, if you see, they are very choosy, it seems. They choose only the normal embryos, abnormal embryos are set. So you can ask, so every time when this abnormal RPL embryos, every time one embryo comes, it gets implanted. So easily they get pregnant and easily they get aborted. So this is a new term which was I was coming across. And one of the positive hope, like what we tell the couple is, even if they have 3 or more consecutive recurrent pregnancy losses, there are people, nearly 65%, who conceive spontaneously and who have a child without any abnormality. So we give them a positive hope with these sentences, and let's hope that there are more clinical trials and RCTs. So many meta-analyses are happening related to the topic which we have discussed the later part. So hopefully we get more insights and more we acquire more knowledge in this. And lastly, this is what tender love and care, which is the most psychological support which we can give to our patients. And thank you for this, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, ma'am, Akila ma'am, and Suresh sir. And thank you everyone for patiently listening to my presentation. And if you have any queries, any doubts, you can ask me now.
Hello, hi Kritika.
Hi.
This is Deepna here. Can you just throw some more light on DNS storage?
Yes, yes, Deepna. Okay, so DNA storage is nothing but you can store the DNA. DNA is nothing but you take 2 ml of blood from the peripheral if it is a live fetus. Okay, if it is an abortus tissue, you can just take scratch some tissues with your scalpel and you can put it in a saline and you can store in your fridge and send for DNA storage. This DNA storage is like we'll store it in the bank for nearly 2 years. Okay, and when you need, like when you want to evaluate the couple prior preconception, we can work with that DNA and we can find out the cause, what was the reason for those all issues, and we can counsel them and give up prenatal working.
Okay, that means there is no testing done
No.
immediately after the sampling, right?
No testing is done. It is just storage.
Okay, once. Okay, fine. So this facility is available with you?
Yeah.
Or you sending to another bank or something?
No, see, I'm not having any genetic lab or something. I'm affiliated to many labs. I send to PerkinElmer, I send to LifeCell or Medgenome. It's all based in Chennai and Bangalore. But then when you take a sample, you can intimate us and we can make arrangement for those. Okay. And even in this corona period also, we had so many DNA storages happening. What we tell the consultant is, please don't discard the sample, just keep it in your fridge door. It is enough. It can be there for viable for 1 week in the fridge door, not in the freezer.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Kritika. It was nice.
Yeah. Thank you, Deep.
Kritika.
Sir? Hi, sir.
I think we have some more questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Sir, can I ask you to her live?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir, you can ask me.
Yeah, because instead of
yeah.
Madam, same consultant, mentions consultant from Dima Hospital. So
yes,
it's a very wonderful session. I joined late, but still I want to ask a few questions. So the first question: when to choose PGS in case of repeated pregnancy loss?
When to choose?
PGS in case of repeated pregnancy loss.
Okay, sir. So as I said, when the couple is having any translocation, it can be reciprocal or a Robertsonian translocation, they can opt for a PGD, sir, or any chromosomal aberrations.
Okay, see, madam, one couple is coming with first time IUD, or RPL. Because a single RPL like it's very disheartening to anyone.
Yes,
Should we suggest them to go for PGS?
No, sir, I won't. Because as per definition and as per common or spontaneous abortion, general or first time abortion main cause chromosomal da solvinga, and it is mostly a sporadic event only. It is not planned. Okay. So we don't say anything. We just tell them it is a sporadic event, and we just check for the maternal age alone, whether she is having any risk, age risk factors, comorbidities, we'll keep a note of it. That's it. But I don't tell them to go for any karyotype also. I don't tell them. Only after, as per thing we were discussing, if we are very anxious after 2 pregnancy loss, we tell them, okay, you can go for karyotype. But not more than. But
2 pregnancy loss.
Yes, sir. But definitive working after 3 pregnancy losses.
Because definition has to go.
Yeah.
So we have to stick to the. Yeah, we have to. So
yes,
first RPL ku தேவையில்லை.
இல்ல ரெண்டாவது RPL க்கு அப்புறம் பண்ணிக்கலாம் சார்.
Yeah, second RPL க்கு அப்புறம் we can go for both partners karyotyping. Third ஆனா மட்டும் we can go for PGS. Am I correct?
Yeah. பட் இப்போ நான் சொல்ல வர்றது என்னன்னா, அந்த கேரியோடைப்ல ஏதாவது ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்குன்னா கண்டிப்பா பாலிமார்பிக் வேரியேஷன்ஸ் கவர் பண்ண சார். அண்ட் ரெசிப்ரோக்கல் டிரான்ஸ்லோகேஷன்ஸ், ராபர்ட்சோனியன் டிரான்ஸ்லோகேஷன் காம்போனன்ட் இருக்கப்போ இட் இஸ் பெட்டர் பிஜிடி போறது பெஸ்ட். And you can tell them about donations also, ovum or sperm also. யாருக்கு அந்த ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்கோ they can go opt for a donor actually.
Okay, because like நான் ஏன் கேக்குறேன்னா, suppose patients with oligospermia. Nowadays the consensus is going that எல்லா oligospermiaக்குமே நீங்க வந்து Y chromosome microdeletion பாருங்க அப்படிங்கறாங்க. Still சில எக்ஸ்பர்ட்ஸ் சொல்றாங்க நார்த் சைடு தான் அது வந்து கூட, சவுத் சைடு வந்து அந்த மாதிரி ஜெனடிக் வேரியேஷன்ஸ் கம்மி, சோ நீங்க வந்து பண்ணாதீங்க, தேவையில்லை, அது வந்து காசு ஆகுங்கறாங்க. இது நீங்க எப்படி பாக்குறீங்க நீங்க?
சார் இப்போ வந்து ஏசோஸ்பெர்மியான்னு வெச்சுக்கோங்க, ஆலிகோஸ்பெர்மியா ஏசோஸ்பெர்மியால ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வந்து நான் அப்ஸ்ட்ரக்டிவா அப்ஸ்ட்ரக்டிவான்னு பாப்பேன்.
இல்ல நான் வந்து சொல்றேன், நான் வந்து I'm not touching ஏசு because அது டிஃபரண்ட். அது சிம்பிள் oligospermia. we are trying to optimize the sperm either for natural or for assisted. natural பண்ணும்போது கூட should we advise them to go for Y chromosome microdeletion because YCMD இருக்கும்போது நம்ம நேச்சுரலா அவங்க வந்து பிளான் பண்றங்கிறது ஒரு வந்து ஒரு லைக் ஒரு நல்ல அப்ரோச் இல்ல அப்படின்னு ஒரு இது இருக்கு, கன்சிஸ்டன்சி இருக்கு.
அது ட்ரூ தான். ஆக்சுவலா Y chromosome microdeletion வந்து நான் ஜெனரலா வந்து டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ண வரைக்கும் என்னன்னா, நான் அப்ஸ்ட்ரக்டிவ்க்கு Y chromosome microdeletion கண்டிப்பா பண்றேன். பட் அப்ஸ்ட்ரக்டிவ் வந்து நான் வந்து CFTR தான் பண்றேன்.
ஏசுக்கு நான் வரவே இல்லை because நான் வந்து
ஆலிகோக்கு தான் சொல்றீங்க.
ஆமா, நான் வந்து ஏசுக்கு பண்ணுவோம்னா when we are planning micro-TC we need to see the prediction of sperm retrieval. அதுக்கு we have to see AZ AFC சரி AB
அல்ல.
சோ அதுவும் வரல. நானு ஒலிகோஸ்பெர்மியாக்கு ஆப்டிமைஸ் பண்ணும்போது நம்ம வந்து இந்த மைக்ரோடெலேஷன் பார்க்கணுமா, should we include in the panel? suppose வந்துச்சு அப்படின்னா then we have to advise them for PGS to choose the healthy embryo.
yes.
சோ இது உங்களோட வந்து விஷன் எப்படி இருக்குது இதுல?
சார் இதுல வந்து என்னோட விஷன் ஏசோஸ்பெர்மியா தான் என்னோட விஷன் நல்லா தெரியும். ஆலிகோக்கு I am not into, but கண்டிப்பா நான் I will look into it and get back to you.
Okay, because ICMR is coming with the like with the guidelines now. எந்த because அவங்க draft வந்து உள்ள so like இந்த கொரோனால வந்து வெளிய விடல, பட் draft வந்து available-னு ஒரு சொல்லிட்டு இருந்தாங்க. டாக்டர் தீபக் மோடி நான் ஒரு நான் அந்த லெக்சர் கேட்டிருந்தேன் நானு.
Okay sir,
this is what like happening அப்படினா fine.
Number 2, can I will to this? Hello, can I contribute to this, sir?
Please.
Yeah, Deepu.
Sir, this microdeletions we are finding a lot of my Y chromosome microdeletions, sir, even in unexplained infertility also, sir. So in case of an oligospermia, I think you can include it in your panel for this Y chromosome, sir, because kind of I'm surprised to see quite a number of Y chromosome microdeletions as of now.
But see இப்ப நம்ம இருக்குன்னு கண்டுபிடிச்சிட்டோம்னா next step should we definitely go for PGS?
That Kritika should answer. Do you
because நம்ம வந்து கவுன்சில் பண்ணி ஆகணும். there's a high there's 100% possibility that male offspring will be having the carrier.
Correct.
They will be having the chromosome defect. so அப்படி இருக்கும் நம்ம PGS பண்ணி healthy embryos, அதாவது female embryos மட்டும் எடுத்து நம்ம வந்து வைக்க முடியுமா?
சார் ஹெல்தி எம்பிரியோஸ் எடுத்து வைக்கலாம், பட் அதுலயும் இருக்கலாம் இல்லையா அந்த டெலிஷன்ல. so it's better you go for a donor.
Okay.
healthy embryos பாக்கும்போது நம்ம மேல்
PGD பாக்குறீங்கன்னா PGD ல அந்த டெலிஷன் பார்த்துட்டு வேணா you can go for a healthy embryo. that is one way.
that is why
you can go for a donor.
donor போறங்கிறது ஆமா நம்ம இது மாதிரி பண்ணி அட்லீஸ்ட் அது அந்த இல்லாத ஒரு எம்பிரியோ வந்து வைக்கலாம்
சார். இப்ப நீங்க எப்படினாலும் you are doing all the genetic workup. PGD ல எல்லாம் தான பாக்குறீங்க. you are doing for the deletion workup everything and you are getting a good embryo. we can implant that.
okay. இப்ப அடுத்த क्वेश्चन வந்து ஸ்டேட்டஸ் ஆஃப் NK செல் தெரபி ஃபார் RPL. பிகாஸ் நீங்க சொல்லிருந்தீங்க இம்யூனோதெரபி சொல்லிருந்தீங்க நீங்க வந்து பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காங்க. இன்னும் சவுத்ல வந்து அந்த அளவுக்கு பண்ண வரல.
ஆமா சார்.
சோ ஒரு எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் இருக்கா, ஒரு தியரி பேஸ் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் இருக்கா உங்களுக்கு இத பத்தி NK செல் தெரபி இன் RPL?
சார் ஆக்சுவலா நான் இது ரிலேட்டடா தான் ஐ வாஸ் ரீடிங். அதுல வந்து they have given, பட் எப்படி சொல்றது, கன்சென்சஸ் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்ல வந்து அவன் என்ன கடைசியா வந்து Cochrane ரிவ்யூல what they have given is this should be in a research basis and more insight should be needed ன்ற மாதிரி தான் எல்லாத்துலயும் இருந்தது நம்ம படிச்சப்போ. so we should ask someone who is doing an immunotherapy. they would be the better person then இந்த இது, because I'm not that whatever I have collected from so far and the latest Cochrane reviews and latest articles la they have said that there are immunotherapies given, whatever it is, IVIG and trophoblast, even other things are given, lymphocytes ella, but steroids whatever. but the thing is there is no definitive consensus. இவங்களுக்கு இது கொடுக்கணும் இவங்களுக்கு அது கொடுக்கணும் அப்படின்லாம் எதுலயும் இல்ல. அதுதான் அவங்க என்ன சொல்றாங்கன்னா, it should be have a large trial number and we have to come to a conclusion, consensus we have to have further. So this is more of research தான். But as I said, நார்த்ல வந்து ஒரு someone is practicing னு I was நான் என்னோட சீனியர்ட்ட கேட்டப்ப I gathered, but I also need some more insight into this, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Yes sir. Yeah.
Because Trichyலயே பாத்தீங்கன்னா we are having called as Mother Cell Regenerative Center.
Okay.
Adula my mentor is like he's working on NK cell therapy.
Okay,
Oru side வந்து they are working for oral carcinoma. So அடுத்தது they are trying for a few other indications. அதுல நாங்க ஃபோக்கஸ் பண்றது that is basically வந்து infertility.
Okay.
So அப்படிதான் so that is I'm interested. And third question, how strong RPL is associated with high DFI and SDF?
How far RPL is associated with a high DNA fragmentation index?
Yeah.
Okay.
How strong association is?
So strong association, there are cases with RPL with high DNA fragmentation irukku, but it's mostly of what to say, the comorbidities which are causing the DNA fragmentation than the direct thing, right? If you are coming to genetic part, it will be either a Y chromosome polymorphism and the polymorphic variations and inversions, so illana ஒரு QH plus இருக்கலாம், or இங்க இதுல போனீங்கன்னா deletions தான் இருக்கலாம் Y microsome. But other than that, DNA fragmentation index is all the oxidative damages which are happening. So அதுவும் RPL ஓட linked இருக்குன்னா, there are papers they are saying DNA fragmentation index is high index is associated போட்டிருக்கு. But I don't know how much அந்த மாதிரி percentageலாம் வந்து we can't say now. Hello.
Kritika?
Yes sir.
Yeah, I think we can go into the chat box to see any other questions are there.
Sir, I'm just checking how to go.
Participants kadutadhukku par more nu irukku paranga. More, just go into the more. Participants more. No, you have no mute, stop video, share. Able to see?
1 minute sir, I'll come out of this. Participants
அடுத்தது பாருங்க, more இருக்கு பாருங்க. More. Just tap the more and you will see chat box.
Sir, I'm just looking participants and okay,
Almost,
I got the questions, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
So we welcome. Okay. Is carrying female baby, there shall be no problem for her. Explain DNA storage in depth. So this one it's from Redimi. They have asked that about DNA storage. I have talked in detail. That was my first question. So I told about DNA storage. And if carrying female baby, there should be no problem. I think this is related to my last scenario. We were thinking of X-linked disorder, and we were telling, yes, we hope so, but we don't know whether it is completely X-linked, because our result came as autosomal recessive carrier mother. So we are just thinking, and in microarray we are thinking to check for the X chromosome deletions actually. So I will update you what happened. And I think I have answered Natesh Prapusa's questions. And
Anita, somebody is asked.
Yes sir. What are the essential investigations for male in RPL? Yes, actually we do a karyotype for a couple. As a couple we do a karyotype, and then as a clinician, physicians, they can do a DNA fragmentation as well as a complete semen analysis. All those things will be helpful. And if so, if we suspect something related to microdeletion, then Y chromosome microdeletion is also said. As we discussed, if the person is an azoospermia, then we'll see whether it is an obstructive or a non-obstructive, and accordingly we will be proceeding with the investigations. So I think I've
Yeah.
answered
All the questions have
everything, sir.
been- Right. Shall we finish up or?
Yes, sir. I
If any
will
other
ask.
questions are there, they can raise the hand in the chat box, or they can even type in the chat box. If any other questions are there. So I think we can wind up.
Okay, sir. So
Kritika?
yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll thanks. You can talk.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for thank you, sir, and thank you, Akila ma'am, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you everyone who have participated. Hope we have covered so much that it's useful in your clinical practice actually, and let us know if you have any doubts also. We'll be there to help you always. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all. I think we should have had a very pleasant session from Dr. Kritika. And once again, thank you for all the doctors and all the friends who had participated in this wonderful session. Thank you. We will soon see you all in some other topics. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
We are ending the session now. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.